Hi, I'm Amy and I'm a journalist in the Manx Radio newsroom. I know we've all been talking about Shoprite this week, so I've been catching up with the Minister of Environment, Food and Agriculture, Clare Barber, about her reaction to the news and what she's going to do to support people going forward.
So I think there had been some awareness that Shoprite had been looking to sell for a period of time, but certainly the news that came obviously on Monday was not something that I was expecting in terms of Tesco having taken a purchase on all of the Shoprite stores.
From your perspective as the Minister of DEFA, what was your reaction to the news?
So I think a lot of the information really was unknown then and actually remains unknown now around what Tesco's will do in the longer run. Certainly the early conversations we've had with Tesco's have been really positive. They're talking about wanting to ensure that local produce, local suppliers have got access into Tesco's. But obviously there's lots of pieces of that puzzle that need to be put in place, whether that be achieving SALSA accreditation, whether that be ensuring that the deal that can be agreed between the producer and Tesco's is right. From my perspective, that's absolutely where government can come in and support and work both with Tesco's and with those producers to support people to get to the right level to be able to supply to Tesco should that be what they want to do and should that be the right business decision for them.
When we say support, what kind of support are we talking about? Is it going to be advice? Will it be financial support in terms of being able to upgrade any equipment that might be needed, any licenses, all of those sort of things?
So it will almost certainly be a blend of all of those things. And we obviously provide grants already to allow people to work towards accreditations, to upgrade equipment. Those are things that we already facilitate within DEFA. And I know DFE also have schemes for the businesses that they support. But it will be about making sure that we're putting all of that into a timely manner in an easily accessible place, working with producers, providing perhaps workshops, providing that level of support that's needed to make sure that people are in a strong position and ultimately get themselves to a more certain position in what we know at the minute is a period of uncertainty.
Some of the producers that we've spoken to have said that in the past they've spoken to both Shoprite and Tesco actually about the price points at which they're able to enter their shops at not being really fit for purpose. And is there much room for government to be able to step in there and to either sort of subsidise some of the local suppliers so that they're able to make enough money to supply a store like Tesco?
I think in reality, subsidising on a per product basis isn't something that we're going to be able to do because I think that from a public purse perspective wouldn't be the most responsible use of funds. But what we can do is we can support in terms of some of that capital support where there is investments in equipment, whether there is investments in training, for example, so that at least those costs aren't then needing to be apportioned against their recruitment costs. So there is a lot of unknowns, I think, in this, and that very much is what we're trying to fill that void at the minute, to provide a level of uncertainty resolution, I suppose, for want of a better word, because this has come as a shock to the majority of people, and obviously for some that will mean a complete change potentially of their business models, and that's absolutely where I think government can support and facilitate and help to make this an easier landscape to navigate.
And a big question that we have been inundated with by our listeners is that of food security, because obviously we do live on an island. There are times when the boat can't go, and how are we going to be able to cope when, for example, Tesco can't stock its shops? Is there going to be any discussions around that?
That will be one of the elements that we discuss, but I mean that's the same as our conversations previously with other stores as well. So one of the pieces of the food security work that we're looking at, and I know I've talked previously, I think on Manx Radio even, that food security is a number of different areas. So there's the day-to-day food security when the boat does go, and we know that actually the provider of the stores isn't actually the most important part in that, but it's about the ability to bring things in, the ability to have a number of different stores in a number of geographical areas that can support people in being able to purchase the right products or access the products. There's also the ability for people to access them based on the cost point, based on their own income, and the ability to be able to get products that actually provide the right nutritional value for them. And then you come to the piece that is what most people, I think, for them is food security, is what happens if something disrupts that normal position that we have, such as you say, the boat can't sail. That piece, and there's a number of elements around it. Some are around storage facilities, some are around the stocks that people hold in their own homes even, and some are around the stocks that are held with our supermarkets. So it's a piece of the jigsaw, but it's not the only piece of the jigsaw, and it would absolutely be something we'd seek to work work with Tesco's to understand where they would fit within that, just as we did during COVID, where we worked with both Tesco's and Shoprite, who have different mechanisms for their supply chains, certainly in terms of storage and whether they're on island, off island. But Tesco's do provide local produce, as we know, and Tesco's are certainly very open to wanting to provide more local produce, but there are still the unknowns within that as to how that will play out.
And I think a lot of people will be thinking as well that government talks a lot about shopping local, but is it doing enough to actually promote that and make that possible for people in terms of making it affordable? We're currently in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and it's got to be affordable for the consumer, but then also for the producers and the suppliers themselves. So are we going far enough?
So I always say buying local is a hugely positive thing. It's also more sustainable. It's far better for our climate emissions. We're not bringing stuff in. It makes more sense for us to consume what is produced locally. And I would always advocate for that. And I would also say that people talk about the price points, and there are some premium products on the island that are at a higher price point purely by virtue of the fact they are premium products. But there are also products that are absolutely at comparable levels. Now, of course, the more layers you put in terms of middlemen, the more expensive those products become. And, there's a good number of farm shops where I stop at the end of someone's drive and put money in an honesty box and take the vegetables out that, often are fresh out the ground that morning. The quality is absolutely exceptional and the price is absolutely fair. But I do recognise there is a challenge for some people in terms of the accessibility of that, depending on your geographical location, depending on your time, depending on whether you have cash. I think there are so many different elements. I think what's important is we look to have as many stores as we can across the island promoting and offering for sale local produce.
From a constituency perspective as well, you're not just the DEFA Minister, you are also a constituency MHK as well. And you have the big Victoria Road Shoprite in your constituency and the Wine Right store as well. Have you had much reaction from your constituents about this news? How are they feeling about it?
So interestingly, no one has contacted me directly, but I have seen comments from people that I know to be constituents on Facebook, on Twitter, etc. And I think there's a real mixed feeling. And I think that probably really underlines that uncertainty. There are some people who perceive that this will be a positive, that there will be Tesco stores all across the island, that there might be more .com slots. There are other people who are concerned for how our local producers will get into the store. And I think all of those things represent actually the balance of risks and opportunities that exist when something like this happens and why that uncertainty exists. So for me, it's about government making sure we create a space where people are able to provide into Tesco's should that be the right thing for them to do, but also look at those other opportunities should that not be the right thing for them. And it's very much government acting as a facilitator in that regard.
Just before our interview, actually, I had an email drop into my inbox with a statement from the Manx National Farmers Union talking about their response, and their initial response, they say, is alarmed. And I think for a lot of people in that position, it's probably similar. So what can you as the DEFA Minister do and say to reassure them?
So I was actually with members of the MNFU when the news dropped on Monday, and we had a brief conversation about some of the worries that exist for producers, certainly those producers where, for example, a majority of their product at the minute would go into Shoprite, and yet they don't have those links in with Tesco's, accepting sometimes when, for example, the boat doesn't sail, and they need to have far more consistency if that's to be a valid route for them to market. But actually, I think those are the really important conversations for us as government to have with producers and with the MNFU acting on their behalf, for us to then be able to take that conversation to Tesco in that on the days when the boat doesn't sail, if they want to know those people are there to provide that product, they also have to support them year round. So those are the pieces of that jigsaw that I'm really keen that we put into place. And as I say, Tesco's absolutely open to conversation at the minute. They're showing a real keenness to have those local products in their store. And it's now about us making sure that we work with those people who are the producers who supply at present to Shoprite and those who supply at present to Tesco's to make sure that we facilitate as best as we can the right outcomes for those producers and ultimately for us all here on the Isle of Man.
I'm sure you have a to-do list that is as long as your arm for dealing with this. What is next on your list in terms of discussions that you want to have?
The first thing has been around facilitating some form of workshops. From a DEFA perspective, this is because obviously there's DFE side. There's also some staff we know who are involved where MERS and DFE are supporting them. But from a DEFA perspective, it's about providing the support for workshops, facilitating the access into SALSA accreditation, understanding what that looks like so that we can make sure we're in the best place possible to provide the support that's needed for producers.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Little Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.